There's a lot of mobile phone controllers out there right now, and the last two ones that I've checked out were from a company called EasySMX. I really like this one over here, the M15. The M10 had a much smaller footprint, but it also was a pretty decent controller. However, I've always been interested to see kind of just where this arena will take us. With these always coming out, I'm curious to see what it's going to be like with the next iteration. So let's set these aside and take a look at something a little different. Now this one is set to be a little bit more premium than the other two. This is from a company called Abxylute. This company's made handhelds before, but they've decided to make a mobile controller. So I'm kind of interested to see what kind of tech goes into this from a company that's used to making handhelds. Let's open this up, take a closer look, and see if it's worth it. If you got a phone and you want to do some mobile gaming, is this the controller to get? Well, let's take a closer look. Now, right off the bat, this was sent to me from the company directly. They have no say in my review. They're not seeing this review beforehand, and of course, all opinions are my own. I'm just going to give you guys my honest thoughts to what I think about their product. So what exactly is the Abxylute S9? Let's hop over to the website and take a closer look at the specs and everything else about it. Right now, this is available on their website for $69.99. They want $99 US for this by default, so it's just on sale for $69 at the moment. This works out to about 113 Canadian after discounts. About 100 Canadian is pretty standard for these mobile controllers. Some of them come as cheap as 40 or 50, but $100 is roughly what the premium ones go for. This only comes in one color at the moment, just black. You can also bundle it with their handheld, or you can get their controller with it as well. So there's a few different bundles. Looks like it's only about $30 if you want their other controller with it. That might not be a bad idea if you need another controller. This should work on iPhone, iPad mini, Android phones and tablets. This should work with mobile games that support controller input. It also supports emulators, of course. This is also a really good way to play remote games from your PC or anything with cloud gaming. One thing I like about this one is it does stretch out quite a bit. This lets you incorporate a lot of tablets. It'll go out to about 216 millimeters. But some of the standout features that I see is that it comes with full Hall effect joysticks. This should let the controller be highly resistant to drift. We also have Hall effect linear triggers, which is really good for racing games. And this supports Bluetooth and USB-C. A lot of these mobile controllers support either or. They don't generally support both. So this is kind of a unique feature. It also has some back buttons, pass-through charging, a turbo and screenshot key, and it also comes with a subscription-free app that lets us use touchscreen mapping. So that's pretty good for games like Genshin Impact. They also have customizable faceplates and a customizable D-pad. That's a pretty unique feature. It's also advertised as letting you play with your case on. I've never seen a phone controller actually work with a phone case, so that should be pretty interesting to test out. It even says thick cases here, and I have pretty thick cases on both my phones, so it should be interesting to test that out. Looks like the faceplates are on sale for $5.99, which is pretty decent. They also have a Discord, so if you have any questions about it, you can hop over there. But for now, let's open this up, take a closer look at the controller, and check it out and see if it's worth it. Well, let's open this big box here and see what it comes with. Looks like in the box, we have another box. And inside this box is, of course, the controller itself. I gotta say, wow, the presentation of this is just pretty cool. We have two different D-pads up here that we can swap it to. They feel really high quality, actually. Looks like there's some joystick cap replacements in there as well. And then we have the controller itself. Let's pull out the controller and set it aside for now. There's also a little envelope at the top, so let's take a peek and see what they sent in here. So they sent a little note. This is always kind of cool to see. It's a nice little touch. This is something that I like to see from companies too. I have had a couple companies reach out to me asking me to say dishonest things about products. Otherwise, they wouldn't send the product to me. I've always declined these companies. This company didn't even ask. They didn't care. They just sent me the product. Even here, they said they appreciate honest feedback. Like, this is the kind of company that I really like. They want to make their product better. They know that things are going to have issues and they want to make it better for everybody. A good company is going to know that products will have issues. but this one is willing to learn from those issues and make their product better. So let's take a closer look at the controller itself. Well, I gotta say, this feels more premium than any other phone controller that I've used. These triggers feel really solid. The joysticks feel really nice. Face buttons are a little clicky for my liking, but they still feel really high quality, and most people prefer clicky face buttons anyways. We have L3 and R3 functionality. There's a nice dome switch D-pad. This D-pad actually feels really good. I don't think you'd get any false diagonals with this. The back looks really good too. All in all, this just feels like a really solid phone controller. The triggers are really nice, and these grips are very comfortable. So first things first, let's take a closer look at everything on this controller and see what it's about. On the front of the controller, we have our 4 face buttons. There's a start button, we have the select button, of course our D-pad, and the 2 joysticks. The inner part here where the phone sits is a nice soft rubber. This does attract dust, but it should protect your phone from scratches really well. There's a lot of rubber up by the USB-C port. My only concern is that this rubber might be a little thick to let the USB-C port go in far enough, but I'll check it out with both my phones. On the other side, we have some more rubber to protect our phone. There's a small piece here that's coming up, but it looks like I can just push that down. I don't think that's anything to worry about. On the left controller, we have the macro switch, and I believe this is the share or screenshot button. On the right side, we have a home button, and to be honest, I'm not sure what this one is over here. The plastic has a nice smooth texture to it. Feels really good, but it is nice when you get a black controller or anything like this to have a little bit of texture. It helps resist fingerprints, and as you can see, yes, it's doing a good job at resisting the fingerprints that I'm trying to put on here. Now on the back, we have 2 programmable paddles. There's one on the left side, and we have one on the right side of the controller as well. On the top, we have some clicky bumpers, and we have those nice triggers. I don't see any imperfections in these, and they look to be pretty good. The face buttons are rubber membrane. There's a nice font on them, and they feel really high quality. The start and select button are switch based. They're a little clicky, but they are pretty quiet. These other buttons are the same thing. They are switch based, but they're not too loud. Regarding the bumpers, I like to check because sometimes these bumpers are easier to push the further you get out, and then they get harder to push the higher you get up. That does seem to be the case with these. So it is very easy to push, then it's much harder to push as you get up near the top. There's not a lot of pressure on these triggers, but I do think that there is enough that they do feel premium. They do feel very smooth, and as you push them down, they aren't bottoming out. They are quite flared, but the only reason that this might be a bad thing is if you wanted to stick it in your pocket. However, these are full-size joysticks as well, so it might not be the most pocketable controller. These triggers do stick out further than the actual controller itself, so as you put this down, it is going to rest on the triggers itself, not the shell of the controller. The face buttons do have a little bit of travel, which is good. They have that nostalgic face button feel. The joysticks themselves do have an anti-friction ring around the outside here, as you can see. The stem of the joystick is also metal, so this does resist scratching quite well. Some of the best controllers that I've seen do have this metal stem. Like the Gully Kit King Kong Pro controllers, those have the same kind of style joysticks. Now these joysticks themselves do have a little bit of texture around the edge. It does feel quite rubbery, and there is a concave cap. This is really good because it gives you extra grip. These are definitely some of the best joysticks I've seen on a mobile phone controller. They have a good amount of resistance to them, not too much, and not too little. Another thing that I'm noticing is that these face buttons are not as small as the other controllers that I've seen. They almost look to be about the same size as a full-size controller. The KK3 Max has very similar size face buttons. These are ever so slightly bigger, but yeah, I do think that the size of these is pretty good. Now looking at the build quality itself, it does feel very high quality. It feels very solid, and they don't feel very hollow. The grips are usually where they feel the most hollow, but it sounds pretty solid to me. The back sounds a little hollow, but not too bad, and this does feel very solid. Front feels pretty good too. Face buttons feel high quality. All in all, the build quality is pretty good. Probably give this about a 7.5, 8 out of 10. Now as I pull this open, there is a little bit of wiggle, As it gets out further, there's less and less wiggle. It is also pretty easy to open. This is the max that it can open. That is pretty dang big. Just to compare that with an average phone, this is the Poco F3. So I'm going to open this to its max and you're going to see this is just huge. So you could fit a good sized tablet in here. The USB port is also loose. This is really good because you want it to be able to move around. If this didn't move around a lot, it would be at risk of breaking. Before I hook it up to anything, I think we should check the weight of this just to see how it stacks up to these other controllers that I have here. So the smallest mobile phone controller that I have is the EasySMX M10. This comes out to 138.2 grams. It does feel very light, but it also feels pretty decent. The next controller that I have is the EasySMX M15. This one comes out to 194.9 grams. This does feel high quality, but the grips feel slightly more hollow than the one from Abxylute. It also has a similar style on the back with some bumpers. And the Abxylute S9 does feel a lot more solid, coming in at 247.6 grams. To put this into perspective, this is the weight of the controller, and this is the weight of my Poco F3. It's slightly heavier than your average phone. I personally like the added weight. It makes it feel more premium. First things first, put the phone in on the left side, stretch it out the entire way, make sure that that USB port is down. I am noticing a little bit of wobble. This was something that I noticed on the M15 from EasySMX as well. It's just because this USB port was too long for the actual phone, so there is a little bit of a gap here. It's very interesting. Let's try putting the case on the phone and see if we have that same wiggle. It's a pretty chonky case, so hopefully this works. Yeah, that works. And with the grip on, this isn't wiggling at all. I would recommend leaving your phone grip on when you put this controller on there. It's not actually bowing out in the center like most of these other ones do. Let's try it with my Poco F6. Unfortunately, I would have to take off my case to get my Poco F6 working. I think it's largely in part due to the little bit of a flare that my case has on these bottom corners. It's pushing it out a little bit too much on the bottom. So this will work with some cases, but definitely not all. That's understandable because there's a lot of cases out there. Starting up their app lets you choose your games, so I've added a few here. Let's go ahead and add those. And it looks like they have a front end, which is kind of interesting. You have a page for the controller settings. We can add local games there. I have 20 Minutes Till Dawn, Titan Quest, Wreckfest, and Skull the Hero Slayer. Looks like the bumpers will go from the beginning of the list to the end of the list. Let's go to the settings page. So there's a language, an instruction book, and about. The controller settings wants me to turn on Bluetooth, and we can import more games from the last page. So let's go ahead and try some of these games out. So it gives you two different modes. It's going to give you mapping mode, which lets you use it for touchscreen games, or you can just set it to automatically use the controller. Since Skull the Hero Slayer has native controller support, I can just use this mode. Let's launch it and check it out. So I'm not getting any input from the controller. Maybe I have to touch the screen first. They did send a little instruction manual on how to use the controller. This will obviously be finalized with retail units. So there's a couple different modes here. Android mode, local games, HID mode. You want to hold these two buttons, so let's try it. Now on green. And now it's working. Nice. So all I had to do was just switch the mode. So with that mode switched, it does seem to be working really well. Seems to have pretty good input latency too. It's obviously directly connected, so that's going to help. I'm pretty impressed with it so far actually. I like the added weight. Controls all seem to work good. Let's check out those triggers on a racing game next. It is automatically working with all these games, which is really nice to see. Start a quick race, and let's check out these triggers. So pushing down the trigger ever so slightly, it does seem to go up pretty gradually. Let's check out the left trigger as well. Builds up really nice. A lot of these games now have full controller support, which is really nice. And one thing I am feeling is the rumble is actually really good for this controller. It's kind of surprising. It doesn't feel like a cheap rumble. That's something I never expect these controllers to do well. There are quite a few different modes you can select if the one that you're using is not working. Now that it's blue, it's using X input. That's what was working the best on Android. But you can also use your Nintendo Switch mode, the PlayStation mode, and the HID mode. It will also show up as quite a few different controllers when you pair it to Bluetooth. This is what it's going to look like. Most gaming devices will use X input. It's going to show up as an Xbox wireless controller. You can adjust the vibration as well. You can use a quick trigger rather than an analog trigger. And it also has gyroscope, but that's not fully implemented at the moment, apparently. So these other buttons aren't going to work in every single mode. But it is nice that they gave you so much functionality with this. Let's try their screen mapping next. So I'm going to try it with Genshin Impact. Let's use the mapping mode. We need to allow the app to display over the other apps. So we're going to go turn on, click on ABXY game, and we're going to allow it to display over the other thing. Then we're just going to go back to the game. It does look like it really wants to connect to Bluetooth. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that anyways. Okay, so now that I got it connected to Bluetooth and wired, it does seem to let you use the mapper settings. There is a small tutorial here with how to use it, which is really nice. It's very straightforward and it does show you how to set it up properly. You can also swap between different profiles for different games, which is really nice. It does seem to want you to go through this tutorial first before you do anything else. I don't really want to see the tutorial, so it'd be nice to have a way to skip this. Okay, I'm going to log in. Let's get this set up and we'll check it out. Fast forwarding a few more days, I've had a little bit more time to play around with this and get the screen mapping set up. You have to launch the game from their software to pull up the screen mapping. So I'm going to go ahead and start up Genshin Impact here. I've already gone ahead and kind of made some presets for these buttons, but I'll show you how to get them set up. First things first, when you get the game up that you want to get some controller mapping set up to, click their little icon on the top right here. You can assign a button input here. You have your left and right joysticks, and then I'm assuming this is a macro, but I've never used this before. Once you tap this, a button will appear in the center, then just press the button you want to assign that to, and just drag that over the spot that you want to assign that to. So I'm going to set A to jump. Next, I'm going to need to set B to run and dodge. Tap that again, press B, and I'm just going to drag that over here. We're going to use X for attack, so let's assign another one. And basically you just want to do this with all your buttons. For the attack, I'm going to use the right trigger, and I believe this is the special, so I'm going to do that with the right bumper. Now the only thing you have left to do is to, of course, put the left and right joysticks on, so let's drag those on the screen. Once you tap those, set those to where you want to put them. I'm going to set the left one, of course, over on the left side, and I'm going to make that a little bit bigger because you want a large range of motion. Get the right joystick on there. I'm going to put that over here, of course. And then just make sure you hit save and back. Now all these should be working, but let's give it a try. So the left joystick seems to work well. The buttons work. Now the only issue I'm noticing with this is, of course, your joystick placement. As you can see, it works really well going the right way. Then as I press left, it kind of rotates and then sets my character moving forward. And if I push it back here, he's barely moving at all. And that's because the joystick placement is a little off. So I'm going to try to fix that. I'm going to move this down just ever so slightly to closer to the corner. Now let's try that. And that seems to be working a lot better. So I'm going to leave it like this, but that's all you have to do to fix that. The only issue I found with using Screen Mapper on this software is the right joystick. If I move, you're going to be able to see it a little bit better, but to me anyways, it looks very angular. That is something to take note of. I'm hoping they can fix this with a software update, but it does appear to be working pretty well in this game. And of course, as you're not moving a ton with the right joystick, you're not going to really notice that, but that is something that I kind of wish they had fixed before getting the software out. If you're looking for a controller to play some Android games that don't have native controller support, this software does seem to work pretty well. So after using this for a while, you're probably going to notice that your battery is running out. This does thankfully support Passthrough Charging. Now, most of the controllers that I've seen have the charging port on the actual controller itself. This isn't very comfortable as it kind of just cuts into the corner of your hand. Thankfully, Abxylute fixed this by putting it in a much better spot. They stuck it right in the middle at the bottom, or rather just ever so slightly off center. This does appear to be pretty good position for it. This is just a much better idea overall. This charging port does support quick charge as well, so let's see how quick this charges. The Poco F3 that I'm using here will go up to about 25 to 30 watts. And plugging that in, it does seem to go up to about 14 to 15 watts max. So it's not as fast as it could be, but this still should be able to charge your phone pretty decently. Currently, as my phone is nearing a little bit closer to full, it is slowing down, but it was at about 15 watts earlier. So it does seem to charge my phone quicker than it's using the battery. at least for this game. It's nice to have this ability. I do wish this was a little quicker, but with a controller, it's obviously not going to match the charging capabilities of the phone itself. What do I think about the Abxylute S9? I think it's a pretty good controller overall, and the build quality is definitely the biggest feature of this. We have a lot of high-end features like Hall effect joysticks and Hall effect triggers, but we also have some programmable paddles we can use for anything on the back. It also barely has any controller wobble, and this is something that you see on most of these phone controllers. We also have a lot of phone controller modes, so we can switch this to different things like X input or various other input modes. We have turbo functionality and screen mapping, which makes this really nice. The rubber on the inside does a good job of protecting your phone, and the USB port is long enough that it's going to fit a lot of these cases. We of course have rubber on both sides. Build quality is also really solid. I don't have any complaints here. If I had to nitpick with one thing, I would say that these plates just don't perfectly sit flush on the bottom. The one on the right side does seem to be pushed all the way down, but the one on the left kind of just sticks out ever so slightly. When you're holding this in your hand though, you don't feel that, and that hasn't bothered me at all, so I don't know, that's just something to take note of, but I don't think that's a really bad thing. This controller also expands quite a bit, so you should be able to fit a lot of things like small tablets and stuff in here. The ergonomics are definitely on point too. This is easily the most comfortable Android controller that I've used. So do I think this is worth it? Absolutely. If you're in the market for a good phone controller and you're looking for something that has decent build quality and good features, I think this one's worth checking out. However, the software at this time is not as mature as something from a bigger company, so I'm hoping they get that updated. I think they do need to fix that angular movement on the right joystick, so that does work a little bit better with the screen mapping. If you're using this on a game that has native controller support, you're not going to see that angular movement. This is only for screen mapping that occurs, so I know it's a software issue, not hardware. I like the minimalistic design. There's no logos anywhere on the front, which is really nice. Overall, it just looks very professional. What do you think about the Abxylute S9? Which phone controller do you use most right now? Make sure to let me know in the comments below. If you have any questions regarding the Abxylute S9, make sure to ask in the comments below. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any future videos, and as always, thanks for watching.